Hello, hello, welcome, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone had a great lunch. My name is Gabby. I'll be your moderator for this session. If you need any assistance using the Zoom platform or any questions, feel free to send me a chat in the chat bar below. I'm very excited to announce this afternoon's session, Teach with Disney Magic with Kevin Roden. All right, so go ahead, Kevin.
All right, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I'm going to let the trivia run in the background here for just a little longer as people are coming in. First, apologies. I am on, I hope, the tail end of a COVID case, so I'm feeling good, but I'm not sounding great, but I am going to do my very best to bring you guys that energy. So I hope you'll love it. I love this presentation. I gave it for the first time about a month ago, and I think you guys are going to love it too. This is all about inspiration. You know, we've learned a lot about technology in the last day and a half, couple of days now, and there's got to be a little heart to it too. It's not just about the technology. There's got to be some heart, and that's what this is all about today, is looking at the Disney magic that brings the heart to it. I would highly encourage you use the chat feature. I've got the window open here, so I'm happy to see you chat. Feel free. Yes, Heather, it is, of course, on a bench. Feel free, turn your mic on, jump on in. I want this to be interactive. I want this to be fun. I am a teacher, just like the rest of you, so please, let's have a good time. I want this to be inspiring. A lot of people yesterday in the Mentee said they wanted to be inspired. That's what this show is all about, and I am preaching more, I think, to myself than anyone else, because more than any other summer, I'm not ready to go back to work right now, so I need to inspire myself a bit too. So that's what we're all about here today. So we're gonna hear the story of Walt Disney and then take a look at how Imagineering uses technology to create these incredible experiences that hopefully your students will want to enjoy and you will want to enjoy with them. So just a quick check before I jump in. I assume people can see the screen because I'm seeing answers in the chat. Are we good with the screen? Because that's the one thing I can't see on my end. I'm gonna assume we are, and if I hear otherwise, we'll go from there. All right, here's our final question. I'll shorten the timer on this one. Thank you, Marilyn. I am a social studies teacher. Walt Disney, near and dear to my heart for a number of reasons, but not least of which is his love of American history, and in particular, one president. Pretty easy to figure out if you've ever been to Disneyland. He has a whole attraction dedicated to him. Absolutely. Lincoln is correct. He literally dressed up like Lincoln and would recite speeches in his elementary school classroom. I'm sure that just got him over really well with all of his classmates. I'm sure he was well loved. What a cool kid. All right, so here we go. Welcome to... As I said briefly, I am Kevin Roden. I have been teaching for 20 years in the Inland Empire. I'm just outside Riverside. I'm in Riverside Unified School District. And last year, I finally got a book published that I've been working on for about 3 years about using Disney techniques in the classroom. And that's what this presentation is based on. The book is called Teach with Magic. We'll talk more about that later. But this particular version of the show is called Tell Your Story. Technology is a wonderful, wonderful storytelling tool, but you have to have a story to tell alongside it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How do you tell that story? But I want to start here with this question. Maybe it's a loaded question based on, you already came to this presentation. But to you, and I'd love to see some answers in the chat, what is the most engaging place on Earth? We talk about the happiest place on Earth, the most beautiful place on Earth. But where are you most engaged? Like you're just locked in. Everything else sort of fades away and you're in the moment. What is it for you that is that most engaging place? Oh, Yosemite. The movies, cool. Disneyland, Mammoth, excellent, excellent. I was kind of Yosemite'd out as a kid. My parents used to take me every single year and we tent camped, and boy, did I learn to hate tent camping. I have not been to Yosemite since I became an adult and could stay home. I would love to see it again, but it's been a long time. But the outdoors, yes, my backyard doughboy, love it. My downstairs recliner in front of the TV is kind of my engagement spot. But of course, for me, it's Disneyland as well. I'm going to brag a little. I just got to spend the last week down there. I was there the whole week of July 4th. I got to stay at the Grand Californian, went to an educators conference. Oh my gosh, it was amazing. I love it. I love it down there. And I've loved it all my life. But as a teacher, I've really learned to kind of question, why do I love it? What is it that engages me there at Disneyland? And that's what we're going to talk about today, because I firmly believe in this wonderful quote: an engaged mind is a learning mind. An engaged mind is a learning mind. Does anyone know who said that quote? Anyone know where that quote comes from? I'll reveal, it's a very cool person. That's me. I made that quote. It's from my book. An engaged mind is a learning mind. That's something I've been talking about for a long, long time. Great question. Dr. Grace, the presentation is huge, so it was too big to put into the sched. So I will put a link into my Google Drive later, and I'll put that link in the sched. I'll make sure you guys get it, definitely. But I couldn't upload it to the sched. Big file. So good question. So an engaged mind is a learning mind. I firmly believe that if students are engaged, they're learning. And I believe if they're not engaged, it's a lot harder for them to learn. So when we have students who are challenging, students who are struggling to learn, frequently it's because they're not engaged. And that's what we're going to talk about. So let's start here with the designers at Disneyland. They are known as the Imagineers. And Imagineering comes from the mushing together of two words by a man named Marty Sklar. Marty Sklar was Walt Disney's speechwriter very early on in his career, and later became the longtime president of Disney Imagineering. He's the one who came up with the word. And Imagineering is a combination of, well, imagination on the one hand and engineering on the other. We've been talking a lot about the engineering side over the last day, talking about the nuts and bolts, how to make it happen. But the imagination part's important too. Imagination is infinitely creative. I know most people, I would argue, that got into teaching did it as a creative outlet. I know I sure did. I love being creative as a teacher. Very few of us enjoy scripted curriculum. It's just not a fun thing to do. We love being creative. Imagination is fun. It's adventurous. It's limitless. It's all of those things we wish our classroom could be all the time. All the time, right? We wish we could take our kids on these incredible field trips. We wish we could travel back in time and do these amazing things. That's imagination. The problem is it's not always possible. And that's why the engineering side is so important. I mean, Disney, after all, is a company. They have shareholders, they have deadlines, they have budgets that they have to follow. So the engineering side is more practical. It says, okay, here's this incredibly cool idea that these awesome thinkers came up with. First of all, can we make it happen? And then secondly, how do we make it happen? So you have to put those things together. You want the creative, you want the practical. And if that's not what you and I do as teachers each and every day, I don't know what it is. Every single day we're waking up and asking ourselves, how do I reach this one class? How do I teach this one topic? But that bell is coming. It's coming. And the engineering at some point kicks in and we say, okay, I have to have something ready to go for this day. We are constantly trying to balance that imagination and the practical engineering in our careers as well. So I'm going to start today with an inspirational story. I want to tell you the story of Walt Disney. I am at heart a social studies teacher. I taught econ and government for this last year, but before that I taught 20 years of history, US history and world history at middle school. So I love to tell this story. Now, part of the reason I'm telling this story is to inspire you, but also because I want you to see an example of what I'm talking about later in the presentation when I talk about visual style. So this is a presentation that I have given to my students, or a very abridged version of one. And I just want you to see how it feels kind of different perhaps than the other presentations you might have seen. So this is the story of a young Walt Disney. It's called A Suitcase and a Dream, the Walt Disney story. I'm going to tell you how he became Walt Disney. It's quite a story. But before we do, I want to see in chat again, what words might you use to describe Walt Disney? When you think Walt Disney, what words jump to mind? I know I've got a few. Visionary, innovative, dreamer, creative. Excellent. Magical. I like that one a lot. Go-getter, definitely. In touch. Ooh, inspires. Excellent. Visionary. Nobody said failure. Nobody said bankrupt. Nobody said lonely, lost, misguided. Yet he was all of those things. A lot. His young life was not an easy one. He failed and failed and failed again, and yet he kept going. It's not how we remember him, and I think that's important. Walt's story begins here in Marceline, Missouri. This was the town where Walt grew up. It was a tiny little nobody town in the early 1900s. The entire town was basically one main street. Disneyland Main Street is based in large part on his hometown of Marceline, Missouri. You can kind of see it when you look at the picture down there, especially the one in the bottom left. You can kind of see the Disneyland Emporium there in the left. You can kind of see the buildings and how it has this long, straight street. This is where he grew up. Nobody kid, nobody town. It was the early 1900s. Parenting not necessarily as friendly and loving as it is today. Walt's father was very harsh. He did not accept any of Walt's creativity, even as a young boy. He was very practical. He was very serious. You need to do X, Y, and Z. Not easy when you're a dreamer. So as a young dreamer, Walt would, whenever possible, use his creativity. As a young kid, he loved to draw. Very early on in his life, he started drawing, especially horses. He grew up in Marceline, as I said, plenty of horses on the farm. He loved to sketch horses. In fact, that was one of his first jobs. One of his neighbors would actually buy his pictures from him. He would buy his sketches for a nickel. And you think about a kid, and you think about what it takes to motivate and inspire our students. Sometimes all it takes is one adult saying, I value what you're doing. I value your thinking. I value your work ethic. I value your creativity. Well, Walt had that in this neighbor who said, these are really good drawings. I want to buy them for a nickel. So Walt very early on is sketching. As I noted before, he also had a deep love of American history, particularly Abraham Lincoln. He would dress up as him in his elementary school class and recite speeches. It is unclear to me, based on my research, if he just did this on a whim or if it was for projects. It seemed to be just a thing that he did fairly often, just because. And then the other thing he fell in love with were trains. There was a train track that ran along the backside of his farm. And Walt tells how he would sit in his farm and just watch at the tracks for hours, waiting for a train to come by. These massive machines. Not something you'd see every day in the middle of Marceline, but it was a big deal for him. He fell in love with trains. You can see all three of these things: his art, his love of history, his love of trains, today, of course, in Disneyland. At a very young age, Walt moved to Kansas City, Missouri. This was actually after World War I. Walt left home at the age of 16 to go sign up for World War I. They said, you can't do that. You're not old enough. So instead, he signed up for the Red Cross. His job, effectively, from age 16 to 19, was picking up bodies off the battlefield in World War I. Now, if you're a young creator, you're a young artist, that could scar you. And one would think that he would come back dark and depressed and horrified. But he actually came back even more inspired to do what he loved. He had seen the worst of humanity, and now he wanted to be the very best of it. So he opened his own cartoon studio, not making movie cartoons, so to speak, but really commercials. He made commercials for his local town of Kansas City. Now, at the time, he would take news stories, local news stories, turn them into a short 10 to 15-second cartoon, and then sell that to the local movie theater, and they would actually run them before the movies. Before long, Walt was on contract. He was making the movies for about $30 and then selling them for exactly $30. He writes that he made zero profit for the first year because he didn't know business. He didn't understand that if it was costing him $30, he should probably sell it for a little more. But this was his first taste of success. People loved his cartoons. They laughed. He wasn't making money, but he was making a difference. Before long, that didn't hold up for him. Eventually, the movie theater closed down, leaving him with no further job. And he's kind of back to square one, where he's like, okay, I had this studio, was doing okay, wasn't making any money, but I was doing what I loved. Now I don't have anyone to buy my product. Well, at this time, California was the place to be. If you wanted to be making movies, if you wanted to be in the entertainment industry, Hollywood was calling. So Walt Disney from Kansas City, Missouri, decides he needs to be in California. His brother was already here, and so Walt took everything he had, which wasn't very hard. He fit it all in one cardboard suitcase. He had one suit, one shirt, one set of pants, packed it in a suitcase. He took some film reels. He had made some short films based on Alice in Wonderland. He packed those kind of as his portfolio, and all the money he had in his pocket, $40. That was it. He bought a one-way ticket to California, and he said, this is it for me. I have to make a success. He wasn't going, maybe I'll try it out and come back. This was a one-way ticket to California. And so Walt, with his dream, his $40, heads to California. And Walt creates this character. Show me in chat, who is this? Does anybody know? Oswald is correct. Disney's not first character, but first big character for sure. Walt had created this while under contract with another company, the same company who made Felix the Cat, and Oswald became pretty popular. He became pretty well known around the country. Walt was doing great. Unfortunately for Walt, the company owned the character. Walt is, again, a creator, not a businessman. And when he got into a business dispute with the owners, they said, look, we don't need you. We own Oswald. He's ours. So Walt was fired. Oswald remains with the company and is not his. Side story, Oswald remained out of Disney hands until about 3 years ago when they finally got it back. They made a weird swap deal with Sony, of all people. It wasn't even a company back then. He is now back in Disney property, but for all that time, Walt lost his greatest creation. So he has now lost his studio once. He has seen the horrors of war. He lost his greatest creation. He's again at the bottom. The one thing Walt did, well, two things. One thing he did have left with him, though, was his dream. He wasn't ready to give up. The other thing he had with him was his new wife. His new wife, who was one of the animators at his studio. He and his wife had just been in New York. They had this big business meeting. He lost his character, and they're on their way back home. They're riding on a train, of course, apropos for Walt Disney. And on the way back on the train, Walt starts doodling. He starts sketching. And before long, he's got himself a new character. And he runs this character by his wife. And she says, who is this? And of course, who was it? That's right. It was Mortimer. Yeah, it wasn't Mickey. It was Mortimer the mouse. And his wife said, Mortimer is not a good cartoon mouse name. How about Mickey? And Walt tried on the name Mickey, and the rest, as they say, is history. His new character almost immediately becomes popular across the country. His cartoons are running again before movies all around the country. Mickey, quickly known, Minnie, quickly known, and the studio is doing great. But Walt's not done. He wants to take it even further. He goes on to create Snow White, which was one of the biggest gambles in Hollywood history, costing millions of dollars. Movie theaters couldn't even show it unless they paid thousands of dollars to upgrade their systems to be full-color animated systems. But Walt said, it's going to work. It worked. It was one of the highest grossing movies in all of American history up to that point. It did incredibly well. So the studio is running. Everything is great. Rest on your laurels, right, Walt? Of course not. He's not done. He's sitting on a bench one Saturday afternoon with his daughters. He's in Griffith Park here in Southern California. His daughters are riding the carousel. And as Walt looks at them on the carousel, sitting on the bench eating peanuts, he has a thought. What if there were a place where kids and adults could play together, could have fun together? And it was on that bench that the ideas of Disneyland start to percolate. He gets together with a friend of his who does architectural sketches, and they put together this sketch of a first idea for Disneyland. It's across the Disney Studios in Burbank, and they take these plans to a city council meeting. And the city council of Burbank says, absolutely not. Theme parks didn't exist at the time. Amusement parks did, and they were always associated with carnivals. They were dirty and they were cheap and not in beautiful Burbank. They rejected the idea. Walt's brother, Roy, said, Walt, this is not a good thing. This is a waste of money. It's a folly. It's a waste of time. We're not going to back this. The studio can't do this. So Walt says, okay, that's fine. And he pulled out of his own studio. Walt left Disney Brothers Studio and created his own company. He said, fine, I'll put all my own self at risk. He sold the rights to everything he had created back to his brother and the company and starts, starts WED Enterprises. And he starts shopping around for land. Where can I build this thing? And he ultimately settles on this big empty field at the time, which was basically nothing, was Anaheim, California. It was orange groves. It was literally at the end of the freeway. It's where the freeways in California stopped. It went no further. But Walt had commissioned a study with the Stanford group, and the Stanford group concluded that within 30 years, Anaheim would actually be the center of Southern California. He said it would be the dead center of Southern California. Well, they were off by about 5 miles. It's actually closer to Tustin, but they were darn close. So Walt was able to get this land pretty cheaply, and the rest, of course, is history. Now, what everyone else saw, orange groves, what did Walt see? Walt saw what would eventually become his Disneyland. He saw the castle, he saw the Matterhorn, he saw all of these things. So of course it's great from here on out, right? Well, no. After a year of construction, only a year, the average Disney ride now takes 5 years to finish. They built the whole park in a year. The park opens on a day that becomes known as Black Sunday. Everything is a mess. They oversold tickets. Tickets were counterfeited. The drinking fountains weren't done. The cement wasn't paved, or the pavement wasn't solidified yet. People were sinking in it. It was a nightmare. That first day could have sunk the company. It didn't. Within just a couple of months, they had turned the problems around, and Disneyland had its millionth visitor by the end of August. It was a nationwide phenomenon. People were traveling from all over to come to this very broken Disneyland. So I want to leave this story with this, just a small taste of Disney, in case you haven't been in a while, to remind yourself of what Walt has created. I don't know about you guys, but I've had plenty of times in my teaching career where I've created a lesson and been like, all right, this is pretty good. And then something magical happens with it. I don't know what it is. I wish I did. After 20 years, you'd think I'd have figured it out. But something just clicks. Or with that one class that doesn't ever get through, it gets through. It just clicks. And it's bigger than you could have ever dreamed it would be. That was Walt with Disneyland. I mean, he had big dreams, but could Walt have imagined a Star Wars land? Could he have imagined a second park, a California Adventure across the way? I can't imagine that he did. So the story of a man who was bankrupt, who had his greatest ideas stolen from him, who was rejected by the very people who he thought had his back, is also the story of Walt Disney. And I leave this story with this quote from a guy who I love, Dr. Disney, Jeff Barnes, who used to be professor at Cal Baptist University. He tells this story and he ends with this. He says, "The bigger your dragon, the better your story." And boy, do I love that. I use that with my students all the time. When they come to me and they say, "Mr. Roten, I'm just not feeling it. This is going on. This is going on. This is going on." The bigger your dragon, the better your story. Imagine when you get to the end of this journey, you get to the end of high school and you get to the end of middle school, and you can look back and say, "I overcame this and this and this and this." That's a pretty cool story. The bigger your dragon, the better your story. Walt had a lot of big dragons and he had a great story. Which takes us to our first break.
The zombies are coming.
I ran a little long into this break. I usually try to do one of these in my classroom every 15 minutes. If I'm presenting or instructing or doing anything for about 15 minutes, it's time for a brain break. I call them a brain snack. They're kind of fun. They wake the kids up. So here's a quick little brain snack. I am going to ask you to play along. I'm not going to force you to, of course, but I want you to get a taste of what my students do to keep their brains awake. So this one is called 60-Second Scavenger Hunt. When the timer begins, you will have 60 seconds to find a physical object that somehow represents something you've learned today. It can be from Walt Disney's story. It can be from something else you've learned today. But I'm going to throw a timer up there. 60 seconds, look around your desk, wherever you are. Try to find a physical object to represent something you've learned. And I'm going to look around and see what I have here. Of course, I encourage the students to get up, shake it off, move around a little bit in these moments. And for once, I don't actually have any Disney things on my desk. This is crazy. Definitely, Chandra, I will. Ah, Disney lanyard, excellent. Yeah, I can almost reach my suitcase that I still haven't unpacked with a bunch of Disney stuff in it, but I can't quite get to it, so. I do have my little, my chain lock fidget toy here, which has some links. So I could say today I learned in Google Classroom in Brianna's session how to link my outside files into my Google Classroom, which I thought was really cool. So there's my link. And Chandra asked how I got the timer on the slides. So this timer is actually an animated GIF. So I know this is going to sound crazy, I use Microsoft Bing as my image search engine because it lets you search if you click a button for animated GIFs. And I just searched for 60-second timer. And I just put it right there, embedded it in the PowerPoint slide. You can do it with Google Slides as well. You can do it with video too. If you get just link a YouTube video, like a 60-second YouTube timer, that'll work as well. But that one specifically is an animated GIF, which is why it keeps looping. So. All right, hopefully you're stretched. You found something. All right, back to Disneyland. Here's Disneyland. It really is incredible. The more you dig into it, the more you learn. I have to, when I go to Disneyland with people, before we walk in the gate, I tell them, I'm sorry, I am going to tell you things you may not care about here today, but this stuff is so important to me. I'm so passionate about it. So you're going to hear a lot of little Disney trivia today. You may not care about it, but think about how you can apply it to your classroom. We'll start here. Here's Disneyland. Walt laid it out in a very simple manner. It's actually built on the city of Paris and the layout of the city of Paris in France. It is called a hub and spoke model. Everything in Disneyland is built around the central hub. Once you get to the middle, where Walt's statue now stands, you can get to any other part of the land pretty easily. Galaxy's Edge is separate. That's another galaxy. You can't blame them for that. But it's very straightforward, very simple. So when I sit down to plan my units for my classroom, this is what I want to emulate. I want those straight lines. I don't want it to be super circuitous. I want to be as clear as possible. You know, John Hattie talked about teacher clarity and the effectiveness of that. I think Walt knew a lot about the importance of clarity in his layout. Meanwhile, just down the street was a place that Walt loved. Walt loved Knott's Berry Farm, which was open before Disneyland. Actually got a lot of his ideas for the park from Knott's. But one idea he did not bother to copy was their layout. I've been to Knott's a lot. I taught Avid for a very, very long time, so we took our Knott's trip there every single year. And what's amazing to me about Knott's is after going there pretty much every year for 20 years, I still get lost in Knott's Berry Farm. I never get lost in Disney. Now, granted, I'm there a lot. But when you try to track the lines, I mean, look at this. There is no plan. There is no straight line. It's just, hey, we have a little space here. Let's jam it in. And I know, I will admit, I have been guilty of this many, many times in my teaching career. Many, many times in my teaching career where I've said, okay, my students are here. I know by, I don't know, let's use a random time, middle of April, state testing, they have to be here. How do I get them there? And a lot of times, I'm just squirreling around every day. I haven't put together a clear plan. I've got all the great tools, Knott's has incredible rides. I get to use all those awesome tech tools. But if I haven't set out straight paths, I'm not sure I've done it as well as I could have. So when you compare the two side by side, it's clear. The more we can pre-plan, the better. But no amount of pre-planning can overcome every challenge. And Walt learned this very quickly. When Disneyland first opened, it's not there anymore, but there was a beautiful flower garden right in front of the castle. The designers quickly found that guests were walking through the flowers. They wanted to get straight through the castle. They weren't walking around it, despite the fact that they had built these beautiful paths. The garden was being destroyed. What do you think the designers did to solve the problem? How do you think they dealt with the fact that guests were walking through the garden? Let's see if we can get a guess or two in chat. I mean, I know what I would have done. It's the same thing I do in my classroom. Make more paths, okay? Make clear the entry. Ooh, put the entry through the castle, okay. I like that. Build a barrier. I'm a barrier guy. That's me. When my students start doing something I don't want them to do, I build a barrier real quick. Whatever that barrier has to be, whether it's detention, whether it's an essay, I'm gonna put that barrier up. Use their footprints, put up a new sign to redirect. They put up a barrier. They put up a beautiful wrought iron fence around the garden. Walt came in one morning, saw that, and ordered them to take it down. He said, this is ridiculous. He said, the guests were telling you very clearly what the problem is. And the problem is not that there wasn't a barrier. He said, the problem is you put a garden where they want it to be. So move the garden. So Walt told them, take down the fence and move the garden. And that's exactly what they did. And that to me was such an eye-opening moment when I first read that story. Again, thinking back to my classroom. How often do I move the garden? And how often do I build a wall around the garden? More often for me, it's I build the wall and say, no, you're on my path, you're going my way. But sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, sometimes our students are telling us in pretty clear language, we just need to move the garden. We need to move the lesson plan. We need to change the order of how we're doing things. Something isn't right. And putting up a barrier isn't necessarily going to solve it. So let's get into how to do it. Finally, we're getting into how to do it. So all of the ideas that you're going to hear today come from this book. Marty Sklar wrote a book after he retired from Imagineering. If people ask me for book recommendations about anything, this is always the first book I recommend. It's not written for teachers, but it's great for teachers. It's not written for leaders, but it's great for leaders. It's great for everyone. He took the 10 basic rules, he calls them Mickey's 10 commandments, for how they design an attraction in Imagineering. And these are the 10 things that they make sure to do for everything. And if we did this for every school, for every lesson, we would have incredible lessons. Obviously, I can't go through the entire book today, but I highly recommend One Little Spark. It's available on Amazon. It's a great read, very quick read, fun, breezy language, excellent, excellent book. Today, we're going to look at one, maybe two, but probably one based on time of these commandments. We're going to focus on the story one. And then if we have time, we'll look at how to avoid overload. But we're going to talk about telling one story at a time. Again, I teach high school now. I taught middle school for a long time. My students face at least 6 academic stories a day, at least. Now, that doesn't count all the other stories that they might be carrying in their mind from TikTok or fight with their mom in the morning. They got a lot of stories. So if I can keep my classroom story on a straight path, they're going to do a lot better. So that's what we're going to look at today is how do you design an experience as a single story. Well, Disney does this. We're going to start with another little activity. I'm going to show you a ride description. Attraction description. And then in the chat, simply tell me what attraction you think it is. Here's our first one. Streak through a haunted gold mine aboard a speeding train on this thrilling coaster-style ride. Which attraction is being described right there? Ah, yes. In Frontierland at Disneyland, that is Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. Here's another one. Enjoy a whimsical tour through miniature versions of fairy tale locales through classic Disney movies. I will accept 2 answers on this one because I actually disagree with Disney's answer. I also did not know, by the way, that Thunder Mountain was haunted. Storybook Canal Boats was my answer. It's not their answer, which is why I say your answer is better. They actually say it's the Casey Jr. Circus Train, which is technically correct. It does kind of take you around the models. I have a problem with this one. I'm going with the Storybook Canal Boats as well. Cast off on a guided tour of the world's most remote rivers where dangerous beasts and dry wit abound. Ah, yes, the Jungle Cruise. My favorite attraction. I have only one item on my bucket list, and that is to one day be the skipper of a Jungle Cruise. That's it, just once. That's all I need. I dress the part as often as possible. You dress for the job you want, not the job you have. So whenever possible, I'm wearing my Jungle Cruise gear. But yes, that is, of course, the world famous Jungle Cruise. And the final one. This is a hard one. If you get this one, you're a real Disney fan / nerd. Here we go. Soar high in the sky in a gleaming retro spaceship inspired by the science fiction stories of the 1920s. Mission to Mars. It is not Mission to Mars. That's a good one. It's not the rockets, not Space Mountain either, not Astro Orbiter. I'm going to give you a hint. I'm going to help you a little. Ah, Erica. Erica's my people right there. This is at Disney California Adventure, and it is, of course, the Golden Zephyr. It's those little, like, metal tubes that just spin in a circle. I've been on Golden Zephyr one time just to say I've done it. That was enough for me. Yeah, again, no idea that that was supposed to be from the 1920s. I had no clue. But hey, there you go. You learn. So I show you this for 2 reasons. Number one, every attraction at Disney tells a story. Every restaurant, every store tells a story. It's not always in front of your face, as I'll show you, but everything tells a story. So too does everything in your classroom. Even if you don't intend it to tell a story, it's telling some story. Because if you're not telling it, they're building it in their minds. I can think back to being a student and doing worksheets. And I know what the story was when I was doing a worksheet. The story was, learn this because it's going to be on the quiz in a week and then you can forget it all. That was the story. We can go so much further into the story. So that's the one thing. Second thing, look at how they describe their attractions. There are no I can statements. There are no students will be able to statements. These are action statements. These are saying what you will experience on the adventure. Look at the verbs they use. Streak, enjoy, cast off, soar. These are the kind of verbs that inspire students. I'm sorry, but I can write 3 complete sentences doesn't inspire. I know we have to have those statements. I know, I get it. But can we also have a story statement too? Can we also have a next step that tells our students what they're going to enjoy that day, what they're going to experience in that lesson? The more we can do that, the better they're going to engage. Remember, that's what we're really here all about. So let's talk about story. Every story, whether it's told through a Disney ride or a movie or a lesson plan, has the same 3 parts. And this should not be any sort of big surprise to anyone. The 3 parts of a story are the beginning, the middle, and the end. That's it. You typically have a small beginning, you have a whole lot in the middle, and a little bit at the end. If it's a movie, you have Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. It's a beginning, middle, and end. In a lesson plan, I know it's often put you have before, during, and after. I know that's one form of lesson plan. If you go all the way back to Madeline Hunter and her 7 steps, really it's 3 steps, right? You have a welcome, you have instruction, and you have check for understanding. You have 3 pieces to the lesson. In Disney speak, they have the same 3 parts, but they call it the pre-show, the show, and the post-show. Pretty simple. This is how I try to think about my lessons. In fact, when I write my lesson plans, these are the words that I use just to see how my admin reacts. They've never said anything about it, but I use pre-show, show, and post-show because it reminds me of what I'm doing, and that is I'm telling a story through my lesson. So what does this look like? Well, I'm going to take you on an attraction here today. One of my favorites, one that really, really helps to demonstrate the pre-show, show, and post-show. We're going to go visit Midway Mania in Disney California Adventure. Here's the pre-show, or a little piece of the pre-show.
Oh yeah. Hey, young man. Hey, partners. Welcome to the practice game. Let's go Our command will be proud.
So in the pre-show, the designers, the Imagineers are trying to answer two questions. They're answering, who am I? Meaning what role am I playing here? And what am I doing? Well, again, think of the classroom. That's what we're trying to do too, right? When we have our welcome question, when we have our anticipatory set, whatever, who am I? Well, today you're a scholar. Today you're a writer. Today you're a mathematician. Today you are someone doing addition. Today you are someone running laps. Who are you? What role are you playing in this classroom today? And then what am I doing? What is the actual activity? What is the actual thing that's going to be done? So in Midway Mania, if you don't know the story to Midway Mania, I don't blame you. It's really easy to lose the story. But it starts here with Mr. Potato Head as the carnival barker out on the boardwalk. And if he's working, which is rare, he's often behind his little curtain because it breaks down all the time. But he is essentially trying to draw you in like a carnival barker would. Well, what are they trying to get you to do? Well, play those carnival games, right? And that's actually what he's doing here too. You are being turned into a toy and becoming part of this playset, as you will see in just a minute. That's why when the ride starts, you spin around a little bit. And if you look at the walls, you see these board games on the wall that get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's because you're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. That's the idea. You are becoming a toy. And what are you doing? Well, he tells you, right? He tells you you're going to shoot these targets, you're going to earn these points, and that's how it's going to work. That's the pre-show. And then you have the actual show where you do the thing. This is the bulk of our lesson. It's the bulk of our instruction in class where the students are performing whatever the task is for the day. They're doing the learning. On this particular attraction, you're sitting there, you're shooting targets, earning a high score, etc. And then you have the post-show.
Let's examine their score.
The post-show to this ride leads you here, to this office. This wasn't originally there. This was made probably, I think, 3 or 4 years maybe after the ride opened, but it was then added. And if you look in this little office at the post-show exit, you see a little box. And the little box says Toy Story Midway Mania Games. And it is showing you, it is again implying, remember what you just did. The post-show is reminding your audience of what they just did. It's processing. And they're saying, hey, there's the little box. This is what you were just in. It's the implication that you were one of the toys. They've been spilled out all over the place. That's why the box is empty. You just got to go and play in all of those toys. So I love that. It's the idea of processing the experience, summarizing the experience. But frequently, they also leave you in a shop. Many Disney rides will leave you in a store. And you can be cynical about it. You can be very cynical about it, and you'd probably be right, and say, well, they just want you to spend money. Of course they do. But what do they want you to buy in the shop? It's a souvenir. And what does souvenir actually mean? Souvenir simply means, thank you 4 years of high school French, I learned something important. Souvenir means to remember. You're leaving them with someone. Oh, of course, Tina, it's the best part. You gotta take home your souvenir. It's to remember. So what is the souvenir we can leave our students in the post-show? Well, I mean, I'm not gonna give them all a toy on the way out, but we can use exit tickets. We can use any number of things that still serve as a souvenir. It's that same model that Disney is using in their attractions that we can apply to our classroom. So I want to show you just one example of how I do this in my classroom. So this was a lesson that I developed last year. I just started teaching high school, and so I'm teaching government and econ. And I wanted to make a lesson about teaching the different executive agencies, the different cabinets, cabinet levels and secretaries of the executive branch. Not the most thrilling information a student is going to learn. And I struggled with it for quite a while, thinking, how can I make this useful and a story? And so I asked myself, okay, where do these characters get together? Where is something exciting that happens? Well, in the Situation Room in the White House, if there is a national security problem, many of these people come together. So I decided, okay, let's do that. And then I found a really cool lesson online from a teacher who had already done a lot of the work in setting this up. And I said, okay, this is cool. Now I want to turn it into a full-on experience. So I call it the Situation Room. Here is the pre-show. Oh yes, show us that souvenir. I love when they come back. I remember Mr. Roten in 7th grade when we did the Black Death thing, blah, blah, blah. Oh yeah, that souvenir, it's so cool. So cool. So this starts with a pre-show. I made this pre-show. This is all me, so this can be posted on YouTube and RCOE won't get sued. I hired an actor for $5 whole to do the actor part. Fiverr, by the way, I'll talk about this in a minute. Great if you are not a super creative person on your own. Pay someone to be creative for you. So I have an actor who sets up the story. Remember, pre-show, who are you? What are you doing? So here is the setup for the Situation Room.
President and Cabinet. During the past year, the Bahi terror group has spread rapidly throughout the Kumar region in the Middle East, controlling an area of close to 13,000 square miles. It has grabbed $2 billion in cash from looted bank accounts, as well as income from oil and gas fields. It has formed a terrorist army with an estimated 40,000 fighters and is now armed with tanks and weapons stolen from the Kumari army. With its sophisticated use of social media and propaganda, Bahi has had over 2,000 Westerners join their cause, including over 200 Americans with passports. It is a group that not only poses a significant threat to human rights around the world, but to the security of our nation here at home. Please review the classified security documents we've provided and give us your recommendation on how to proceed.
So if you're a student sitting in a classroom and that's the first thing you see to start class, you're in. Like, that's not normal. That's not something you see every day. I certainly don't do things like that every day. I try to do them as often as I can. That usually works out to about once a month that I get a real big experience. It's the e-ticket ride. You know, not everything at Disneyland is an e-ticket. Sometimes you just got to hop on the car and drive it down Main Street. That's okay. But there are big things we can do. We have so many tools, and I hope you have learned about all of these tools over the last couple of days, and you're inspired to go and try them. Because I could use, this hour to teach you how to do one tiny part of that video. But the reason I don't, when I do my presentations, the reason I'd rather just show and not tell, is because I believe in you. And I don't just say that to be cheesy. I say it because that's how I learned. I saw cool stuff and I said, ooh, I want to do that. And then I found out how to do it. So all of the stuff that you see is stuff that I've learned to do just from searching online. And that's my pre-show for that. Now, again, that's 20 years of experience, putting in a lot of work to get there, but that one went really well. So that's the pre-show, sets things up, but this is also the pre-show. Pre-show doesn't have to be a video. It can be as simple as a reading that's on the kid's desk. This is also there. This is sitting on their desks when they come in. They have these confidential envelopes, and inside the envelope is a very boring, normal-looking, long-looking worksheet. That's a lot of reading. On average, if I stuck that in front of one of my students, they'd check out immediately. But if I have shown that video first, and now I tell them this is your briefing on how you're going to decide how to solve this problem, they're in it. They're so happy. They can't wait to read it and tear it apart and learn every little piece. It's super cool. This is one of those lessons where I spent so long building it that the day I was going to do it the first time, I almost didn't do it. I was like, this isn't going to work. This is going to fail. and I'm going to feel like I wasted all this time. I came so close to not doing it. And then I did it, and it was amazing. It was better than I could have imagined. The kids took it in directions that I would never have guessed. And so second semester when it came around, I was like, oh, cool, it's coming up. I'm not going to do it because they'll never do it as good as they did first semester. Oh, yeah, they did again. And they blew my mind again. Because when I give them a new identity, it gives them that opportunity to step out of themselves. They really were acting like the Secretary of Defense. They really were acting like the CIA director. And it was so cool to see. So in this big long thing, there's a couple of quick setups. It gives the background story of what's happening. And then their individual role is down there at the bottom. Again, the pre-show, who are you and what are you doing? That's what this sheet sets up. And then from there on, it's a pretty traditional lesson. We go together, we talk about what kind of threat does this new group appear to offer based on what we just read. Then we have our council meeting where they have to read their individual part and then make their recommendation to the president, which essentially they read the bottom part of their thing. It's a lot of reading, it's a lot of responding, but they're thinking and having fun the whole way because they're being a different character. And then we have the actual meeting, as I said. It was very careful in picking who my one president would be. And in one of my classes, the kid who wanted to be president was one of those total goof off kids. And he's a senior. So I'm like, all right, no one else volunteered. This is my first time teaching seniors. What could go wrong? So I handed over to Eduardo, and he did an amazing job as the president. Probably was the best president that we had all day because he had so much fun. Now, granted, all he wanted to do was nuke everybody, but he took everybody's, all of the different cabinet secretaries' responses very seriously and would bring it back to, well, here's why I think we should actually use our nuclear arsenal. So it was incredible to see him take on that role. And then you've got to close out. As fun as it is to do these sort of experiences, to do simulations, to do these super cool activities, you've got to have the post show, just like Disney does. Because again, what does the post show do? It wraps it up, it summarizes it, and it leaves them with something to remember. So they make their final choices based on what recommendations they would make, and then we close with a debrief. I close every lesson, or I try, I should say. Sometimes I run out of time, of course, but I try to close with a debrief because our students, as much as it seems like they're not engaged, as much as it seems like they're doing nothing, especially for the last year and a half, believe me, I know, we ask them to learn a lot every day. We ask them to hold a lot in their brains every single day, from class to class, hour to hour, period to period. And so every chance we can give them to say, okay, let's step back a little. Let's think about the last 40 minutes. What did we just do? What did we learn? What did we experience? Where do we go from here? That post show is so important. Give them that souvenir to walk away with. Tell that story. Actually really
The
good.
zombies are coming.
Amy makes a really good point in chat, and that is also the post show allows them to get out of that character. It brings them back into their reality, and that's important. And I think the Disney post shows do that a little bit as well. You know, once I'm back into the souvenir shop, I know, okay, I'm a customer again. I'm a Disney guest again. You know, I'm no longer caught in this thing where I had to be the CIA director advocating to use Black Ops assassinations. Like, that's not what I believe. The debrief definitely lets them step out of that. So great point, Amy. 100% agree with you on that one. All right, here's one more brain snack. Get your brain going, and then we'll hit the final points here. Probably my favorite brain snack to do in the classroom. Also fun on Zoom if you can encourage your audience to turn their cameras on. I'm not going to pressure you to do so. But this one is called Touchscreen. And in Touchscreen, I ask students to review their learning from the day, whether it's the worksheet, the notes, the reading, whatever, and choose just one word. Pick just one word that stands out to you. It doesn't have to be the most important, just a word that really stood out to you in the lesson. And then turn to a partner and then spell that word in the air with your finger. So I'm going to ask you, pick a word from today's presentation and just try it. You don't have a partner next to you. You can turn your camera on, off, I don't care. But I want you to actually feel the experience of what it does to your brain when you're trying to write in the air with your finger. So take a moment and go ahead and pick a word and write it out in the air with your finger. When you are in the classroom, this is one of the true joys of teaching, is watching a class of 35 students all do that at the same time, especially if they're all 17, 18-year-old football players. It's hilarious. They love it. They learn very, very quickly that it doesn't work. When you're facing your partner, you spell it to yourself, it's actually mirrored to your partner. So then they have to go, oh, okay. And they have to think, all right, now I have to spell it backwards. That's difficult. Your brain is working so hard. And I always tell the students after they've done this, and it takes 60 seconds, 2 minutes, you're never going to forget that word. You will never forget the word that you spelled with your finger, because your brain just did so much work and had so much fun that I guarantee you're going to remember that. So what I love about these little brain snacks is, again, like I said, I try to do them about every 10, 15 minutes in class. It just gives them a chance to reset their brain. It's almost like having a post show in the middle of the show. It just kind of breaks things up and keeps them moving. So there's a great book called Ignite. It's from a neuroscientist who became a teacher. And she writes all about this. She doesn't have ideas on what to do, but she talks about the idea of refiring the brain whenever possible. And it's called Ignite. I think it's research-based strategies for learning or something like that. But it's called Ignite. You can find it on Amazon. Great book. And that actually takes us to the end. We're not going to have a chance to do the bonus level. I was going to show you kind of a little bit of behind the scenes of how I make all this stuff. We don't quite have time for it, so I'm going to jump through all that. Just pretend you're seeing all these. Those are not mine. That was the example of what not to do. And then there was these examples of all these cool stories that I get to tell because I teach social studies. If you want to, oh, too far. If you want to see any of that stuff, it is available, and I'll get to that in just a minute. So everything you saw today was made with 3 programs. That's it. Everything you saw today was made with 3 computer programs. I do we'll say 80% of my work in PowerPoint. 80% of my design work is done in PowerPoint. I don't remember, I think it was the Google Tools. I was in a session yesterday where it was presented as Google Slides is the best creative tool out there. And I totally agree, except I would say PowerPoint. But they do virtually the same thing. They're essentially a flat blank canvas that you can do anything with. And I use PowerPoint for almost all of my things. I design posters, I design worksheets, I design, obviously, presentations. I do everything in PowerPoint because it's just a blank sheet of paper. Any video work that I do, I use Adobe Premiere, which recently, I haven't looked into this, my district pays for it, thank you, my district, but they've just added a free online version very recently of the Adobe Creative Suite. So I would definitely check that. And then finally, Photoshop. If I have to do like real serious photo editing, which I do very rarely, like that's like less than 1% of my design work, I might use Photoshop. I would say if you want to do awesome presentations, learn PowerPoint, then learn any video editor. I recommend Premiere, and then you can worry about photo editing somewhere down the line. Deborah asks, do you have a link to the presentation? I don't yet, Deborah. I will. It was too big to post into the Sched. So I'll post it to my personal Google Drive, and I'll make sure the link gets put into the Sched. But all my contact info is coming up, and it'll be available on my website as well. So I did write a book, and that is the book. You just heard chapter 7 of the book, which is Tell Your Story. All 10 chapters of the book are based on Marty's 10 commandments. So each of the commandments goes over how to apply it to your classroom. So that was the Tell Your Story chapter that you just heard. A lot of it, not the whole chapter, but that's what the book's all about. It's been out for about a year, and it was an adventure to write it. It was even more of an adventure to get it published during COVID. Boy, that was an exciting thing. But I would invite you to check it out. I've gotten really, really good feedback, so I think you'll like it a lot. It's a mixture of my personal stories of Disneyland mixed with my classroom, mixed with Disney Imagineering stuff. I hope you'll love it. It is available on Amazon or on my website, which is teachwithmagic.com. Thank you, Marilyn. And if you want to get in contact with me, I'm a teacher. I love, love, love talking with other teachers because that's where most of my ideas come from, is from talking with others. So online, you can use teachwithmagic.com or mrroten.com. They go to the same place. They'll take you to my website. Email is always available. You can contact me through the website or at rotened@gmail.com. And on Twitter, I'm very active on Twitter. It's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me, actually. I'm just at Mr. Roten on Twitter. And then finally, if you want all of my lessons, everything I've ever created, you can go to Teachers Pay Teachers and then leave it immediately because I don't post my stuff there. It's all free on my website. Everything I have ever created is free on mroten.com. I do not believe that we should be charging each other for stuff that we do together. And most of the stuff I've created is stuff I've done with other people. So I have 7th and 8th grade social studies up there, and now Gov and Econ is also up there. There's also a whole bunch of SEL and Avid stuff up there. So it's all free. Check out mroten.com. And it wouldn't be a Disney presentation without the end card. You gotta have the end. You gotta have an end to the story. Thank you everybody so much for coming out. I made it 1 minute under my time limit, which is like a record for me. I'm usually way over. So thank you guys so much for coming out. If you have questions, I'm gonna hang around in chat, but I don't want you to make you late to the next session. Gabby, I'm gonna turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you for everyone that participated as well. Like you said, we'll put your Google Drive on the Sched app, so that'll be available to everyone. Next session follows at 2:10. Okay. Thank you so much. All right.